It seems like an intractable thing to change laws, but they do, I don't know, in our time in the last little while, the whole, I guess the whole medical model is the way that the mainstream seems to understand law reform. So definitely that's what's happening in the cannabis realm. So 2016, medical cannabis was made legal federally in Australia. So since that's rolled out in the last 8 years, it is now pretty damn easy to get cannabis. So whether you're treating a serious illness or whether you're just needing it for some sleep or a bit of back pain or whatever, it's definitely something that's easy to procure. So if you told me that a few years ago, I would have gone, no way. Definitely Australia's been really the outlier in regards to the legal availability now of psilocybin and MDMA for therapeutic purposes. However, the way that we actually access that at the moment is extremely restricted. I believe there's only 10 official prescribers who would be psychiatrists in our country who can legally prescribe psilocybin. And I also believe that the conditions under which you can get that kind of therapy is also extremely limited. And also it costs a fortune. So it'll be really interesting to see how that evolves in the next few years. Hopefully it will evolve in the same way as cannabis, where it's very accessible and very cheap. So let's wait and see. And just back to the comment about mass civil disobedience, like definitely if you visit the US in certain states or in Canada, it's kind of like Nimbin multiplied by thousands. As in all around, people will simply get out there and just defy laws, to the point that if they shut down one, cannabis dispensary, another 10 will pop up. As in, people are really fiercely, how can you say it? Fiercely anti-authoritarian. Australia seems just a little bit more relaxed, which is fine, but it is definitely, when it comes to a lot of change, that it's that whole mass, or it's basically a tipping point where there's just so many people saying no. So anyway, that probably won't happen here, but it definitely has happened in North America, which is always very exciting. We've had a little swap in our program. We haven't? You're ready to rock and roll, Liam? Okay, good on you. Okay, no swap in the program. We have Liam James next. And Liam, as I mentioned earlier, is a mycologist, ethnobotanist, a farmer and a student who's passionate about the wider use of mushrooms and what they can do for the health of us as well as the health of the planet. And in this session, Liam's going to be presenting some groundbreaking science, and will help us see the earth underneath our feet in a very different way. And like fungi are such an important and crucial part of soil biodiversity, and this diverse group of organisms can help tackle global challenges, including climate change, and also, human health, and how we operate within this beautiful biosphere. So, Liam.
My name's Liam, as you already know. I'm just going to stand during this because I'm actually going to use these sort of like my palm cards to help me so I can communicate as effectively as I can. So I apologise if I do turn my back on you at times, but I'm just doing my best to convey this. To give a little bit of a background about where I started and where I'm at right now with my understandings and passion for all these awesome things that we've spoken about this morning. for the best part of over 10 years now, I've spent a lot of time collecting various ethnobotanical plants, learning about their uses, learning about the historical traditional practices, and just gaining more understanding as the days go by. I spent quite a lot of time collecting, the ayahuascas and the San Pedros and all the awesome tools that we can have access to. And then I started to realise that we actually have all these compounds that exist within the Australian forest, or wherever you choose to seek it, essentially. So I went on a bit of a mission collecting native species of plants, not just for recreational use, but also like foods and some pretty serious medicines. I know I'm talking to the right crowd. Most people here are pretty aware of that sort of stuff. So yeah, naturally I sort of gravitated towards growing mushrooms as well, understanding them more. And now, once again, I've sort of used that same sort of method and really honed in on the native species of mushrooms that is, it's a growing industry and a growing understanding at the moment, so it's pretty cool to be a part of it. I'm not going to speak so much about psilocybin, but I am going to cover mushrooms as a whole, and I hope that it at least triggers some ideas or maybe some better understandings for everybody here. But yeah, so I'm going to kick it off. What is a mushroom? Some people, are a little bit confused, and I think it's really important to note that the fruiting body that we actually see when we go to harvest the mushroom is actually the sexual organ of the living organism itself. And so basically, as most people are aware, it starts from a spore. The really interesting thing about mushrooms, which I think adds to a bit of, it's kind of cool, but each spore is only half of the genetics. It's what's known as a haploid, and it needs to find its partner for it to become a whole genetic living organism for it to fruit. So it's kind of interesting, like 9 times out of 10, when you look at a mushroom, to even just understand that however that one spore's got to that spot to colonise its substrate, that it also found its mate in there as well, connected, and continued the life cycle, which is pretty cool. Can I get the next slide, please? Some conversations come up in some of the circles that I'm in about really beneficial relationships with, say, mycorrhizal fungi, and the idea that, fungi is great for the soil, and some fungi is great for relationships with plants, help them trade nutrients. But also some mushrooms aren't that good for the environment. And these are some of the types of ecological roles that they do play. Decomposing mushrooms. The main mushroom that most people eat and that we get from Woolworth, Agaricus, the genus Agaricus, they're all known to be decomposing mushrooms. All your pathogen science is concentrated on pathogens for the last, I don't really know how long, it's been a really long time. I think it's a lot of fear-based research, but now the understanding of mushrooms has basically taken over research and is really inspiring a lot more research and moving away from diseases and pathogens. Symbiotic relationships. These are the interesting ones, like lichen. I'm not sure if people are familiar with old man's beard, but that's not just a fungus, but has developed a relationship with other living organisms as well to help it protect and keep it safe from the environment, essentially. And endophytes. These mushrooms actually live inside of whatever organism it is that they've colonised. These can be good or bad. It really depends on the type of mushroom. And so this is just basically clarifying the forms of these type of mushrooms. Saprophytic mushrooms. This is, I think, at the moment, it's the most important class of mushrooms to study. This is where all of our mushrooms like lion's mane, oyster mushroom, reishi, literally every single food just about, or medicine that you could be aware of, comes from a class of mushrooms called primary saprophytes. And what this means is that as soon as a tree falls and dies, that actually triggers this mushroom as a primary saprophyte to be the first mushroom or the first living organism to try and eat that food, essentially. So over thousands and thousands of years, I have no idea how long, their adaptation to outcompete each other is aggressiveness. So all these mushrooms, like for example, lion's mane, it's one of the most aggressive mushrooms, and when released into our native ecology, it completely outcompetes all the other mushrooms that are in that genus. We have a native lion's mane called Hericium coralloides. Things like this are under threat, and that's why parasitic fungus are obviously not very good for the host. But we have found some pretty interesting uses. Obviously, for example, cordyceps being a parasitic fungus, colonising all kinds of insects and critters and leading them to basically wherever they want to go. So mutualistic relationships are really interesting. There's various ways of being able to protect your plants essentially from pathogens. There's a few mushrooms in the Trichoderma genus that actually act as mutualistic endophytes, and they can actually colonise your plant and make it impossible for anything else to penetrate it. A lot of cannabis growers at the moment, I can't remember the name of the species, sorry, but they are using it to inoculate their plants beforehand to use a more natural and more beneficial way to protect themselves from pathogens, essentially. And as I mentioned before, we have primary decomposers, secondary decomposers, and biotrophs. That's just reiterating what I did in another language, essentially. Thanks. Yeah, I have spent quite a lot of years cultivating various mushrooms, and I thought I just wanted to put together a few images. And I do apologise, I'm not the best person to present visual information, but this is the best that I could do. And I just wanted to be able to show everybody that a lot of the work that we do as mycologists, it's not really just playing with the mushrooms themselves. A lot of it is like working with petri dishes. As you can see, the mycelium, that's actually growing a cubensis. The mycelium has colonised that plate and has ran out of food, and now it's basically at a point in its life where the only thing that it can do is try to reproduce. So the mushroom's actually grown on the petri dish, which is pretty interesting. But there are obviously, like, you can go different paths with your cultivation. All that really matters is understanding each mushroom, because for however long that particular mushroom has been living in that environment, much like land races with cannabis, they start to produce metabolites and enzymes that will break down certain compounds, and those compounds actually add to the nutrients and to the building blocks that they have evolved to become what they are. So it's really important to find out what nutrients, what these mushrooms grow on, and what we can do to provide any supplements that they may or may not need to try and simulate their life, essentially. But as you can see from here, a typical method coming from a petri dish with home cultivation. Sorry the images aren't as good, but with that middle top image, it's actually a jar, and it has a substrate in it, and you can see the mycelium starting to colonise the jar. In the natural world, a lot of this we don't actually see. It's happening underneath our feet or in the trees as we walk past them. But once that will reach its colonisation point, I have a reishi on the right here. It's at the top right. It's actually Ganoderma steanatum. That's a native mushroom that some of you might be familiar with. Aussie Mushroom Supplies. It's probably the best resource for all mushroom growers in Australia. I jacked that photo off of his webpage, but I think it's pretty cool to be able to see a native reishi as opposed to the very typical phenotypes and genetics that we do see elsewhere. I think also the really interesting thing about reishi is that familiarity with terpenes and the structures of these monoterpenes has been really good, well, for me personally, and helpful with research to understand the medicinal properties in reishi across basically your genus Ganoderma, which is the genus for reishi. There's various species, and each of those species has a legitimate triterpene and triterpenoid profile that we don't even know what it is. Only one compound has actually been researched, and yeah, it's pretty interesting to understand that there's all these amazing medicines that, yeah, we really haven't discovered yet. And I've just added, for context as well, a lion's mane grow bag on the left here. You can see fruiting. Those two bags would have been grown in an environment where you would have to simulate what they need for them to fruit. Whereas the box down on the bottom on the right there is what's known as a monotub, and that's basically creating the environment within that tub and just letting that do its work, as opposed to regulating it with external components, fans, humidifiers, and so on and so forth. Louise asked me to give a bit of a rundown on some visualizations of cubensis. It's interesting, I think, like with the cannabis and with the magic mushroom, I'd say industry or like passion or hobby. When it comes to like working with genetics and really pushing the most out of an organism, I don't think there's many places that you can, there's many other things that you can visualize, maybe dogs, but cannabis and magic mushroom growers have really pushed the limits of experimentation, mutations, and it's completely warped the look, the chemical profiles of some of these mushrooms. But it just goes to show what is possible when you do breed anything really, and you do work with selection methods, and it's a bit of a guessing game at the same time. But the photo in the middle is probably how most people would see gold top. It's not always the most prettiest looking thing. Some mushrooms are a little bit sus, so if you are in doubt, say no. But basically, I've used this photo in the middle to just give an example of a typical field cubensis. The one on the top right is a little bit better looking, probably hasn't been out in the sun as long. And then the mushroom on the top left, this is typically what a cubensis will look like if you were to cultivate it. A little bit different from the field mushroom, but still resembles a lot of the characteristics, colours and shape. However, through obviously a lot of commercial growing and a lot of people just really being passionate about tinkering with genetics, always trying to find like a more potent source of anything really. It has. Can you go down to the down a little bit, please? I'm not sure what people are familiar with, but this particular mushroom actually comes from a mushroom that Terence McKenna himself picked. Terence and his brother Dennis were the first people to typically cultivate magic mushrooms using the PF Tech, and from then a lot of people have been using his genetics, and it's from what you can see here, like this is a completely mutated version of a cubensis. It generally looks very blue and very white. It's known as an albino, which is kind of interesting because albino mushrooms have been known to be the most potent mushrooms. Albino and leucistic mushrooms, which is throughout the animal kingdom. I don't know if anyone knows, but anything with leucism has blue eyes, and anything with is albino has red eyes. But in the mushrooms, they have similar characteristics to that. Essentially, obviously, they don't have eyes, but they do show telltale signs. Yeah, and this is some of you might be familiar with this one. This is what's known as albino penis envy. This was kind of the first like really potent mushroom that mutated out of people just growing these genetics for so long in cultivation. And from that mushroom is actually what the other mushroom on the bottom left, this Jack Frost strain, came from. But yeah, just to give you some understanding of genetic diversity, I might add a wolf and a chihuahua on this one time for my next presentation. This is a bit of my own thoughts and feelings, and I mentioned it before. I went on a walk with a group called the Queensland Mycological Society, and we were in a protected space of, I can't remember the name of it, but essentially this piece of forest had been saved by the Queensland Mycological Society because they were able to prove that a mushroom is only endemic to that land. And for obvious reasons, like we don't want to destroy, most of us don't want to destroy habitat to risk losing something like that. In my earlier days collecting plants, not all of them are legal. So, for example, tobacco. I started to think about trying to understand ways that I can grow certain compounds and not have to worry about the law, which is obviously an ever-changing thing. Having to grow up here, talk about it. It's a complex topic, and each plant, each compound, there's a lot of research that can go into each one. But I think if you invest time into understanding what it is that you really want, you will find like a native source of that, and probably pretty local to you as well. And I think that that's really important because I think there's a lot of focus on plants that aren't native or mushrooms that aren't native to Australia, but we have everything here. Literally everything is here. It's just got to be discovered and worked with, I suppose. So, yeah, I think it's really important to know because you do have an opportunity to perhaps secure land, save land, and protect something that is valuable to us all, even if we don't really understand it just yet. Securing food and medicine is, I think, COVID probably taught us more than anything, most of us anyway, the importance in this, and perhaps an impeding moment in time where it could become really important to have these understandings, have these values, and have access to this. And once again, I think it's really important to remember that we are human, but we all do come from the same earth, and a lot of these living organisms have been living with us since our beginning. So I think it's important to respect that and yeah, definitely do something before it's too late. Is that it? As I mentioned earlier, I've been collecting native species of mushrooms for quite a while now. I recently just started studying at QUT because I want to learn more about the sciences that I can apply to understanding, research, and develop these very real medicines that exist within nature. I think most people will be familiar with old man's beard. The genus that this comes from is Usnea. It has an active compound in it called usnic acid, which is an antibiotic. And along with this other mushroom down the bottom left, it's now known as Trametes coccinea. It's an orange mushroom, if you can't tell it. Everybody would have seen it. It's literally everywhere. This has a compound in it called cinnabarinic acid. It's very well studied. It also has an unknown antibiotic in it that hasn't been studied yet, but we can see it. And I think it's important to mention because the really interesting thing about these two mushrooms and the medicines in them is that Trametes coccinea, the orange mushroom, actually completely destroys Streptococcus genus bacteria like instantly, like they have no chance. Usnea smashes up staph, but it's inconclusive exactly what species, but it's very effective against Staphylococcus aureus and other species as well. I think what's really interesting about these medicines compared to other antibiotics is when you start to learn about their cellular mechanisms, which means like how a cell will interact or what it will change in another cell, or why is it killing this bacteria. The really cool thing about these mushrooms is that all they do, their cellular mechanisms, is that they destroy the biofilm that protects the bacteria from our immune system, which most people that study pathogens and medical practitioners understand this is a really difficult thing for antibiotics to overcome. So both of these mushrooms together, one works with gram-positive bacteria and one works with gram-negative bacteria. And as far as I can see, these will pretty much get rid of anything, and all they're doing is destroying the biofilm and letting your immune system actually do the rest of the job. So I feel like that's a more holistic way. It's also very cheap if you live in Nimbin because there's old man's beard everywhere. And I wanted to make a mention of it because a lot of the ways that we discover medicines and mechanisms, things that will eat something and turn it into something else for bioremediation ideas or projects, it comes from nature. So I was at the Nimbin pub yesterday and I was having a beer. I tried not to, but sorry. I did take a photo of some usnea growing off of the floor. If you are at the pub, you'll see. And I think it's amazing because I don't think there's supposed to be any mushrooms there, and I dare say it's been treated by something. But it's obviously protecting it against a wide range of mushrooms, but not this one. And I think that that's just a testament to the strength that this mushroom has and the ability that it has to break down certain compounds or just thrive, just to live. That's pretty much all I've got to say in this moment, but if anybody has any questions, I'd love to answer questions, and I'm heaps better at that. Okay.
Hello.
I'm happy if whoever wants to ask.
We've got the roving mic, but we'll start with Louise here and then come over there.
Thank you so much, Liam. That is just awesome information. What I am really interested in is these natural antibiotic fungi. How are they applied? How do you take them?
What I've personally been working on for a while now is understanding tincture extractions, spagyrics. I'm not sure if people are familiar with these ancient chemistry practices. Get the mushroom, get some very high quality alcohol, powderize your mushroom if you can, soak it in your alcohol for 3 to 4 months if you want. That will absorb all of the compounds into that. And because of the polarity of alcohol, that'll basically absorb all of the compounds that are soluble in that. And then I do a dual extract, so it's a water extract as well, so all your polysaccharides, and basically it's like a whole plant medicine, but it's in a tincture. Yeah.
Is there any possibility of skin infections rubbing it on your skin?
I mean, like, I'll say yes, but like without having any idea if that is possible, you know, like it'd be a good, because these are very new understandings or new medicines, new, there's, I would say that it'd be like an extended experiment or something like that. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you very much. Thanks, question.
Yeah, hi. I just want to know how much do you know about our Indigenous Australians and what they knew about these mushrooms? What do you know about them?
Yeah, sorry. It's a good question, and it's hard to answer because of the things that have taken place, and because of the knowledge keeping, and because of, much like when you lose an endemic mushroom or plant, we've kind of lost a lot of endemic brothers and sisters and knowledge. So there is an article that does speak about this orange mushroom, it used to be known as Pycnoporus cochineus, but it's now known as Chlamydes cochineus. But if you Google Pycnoporus cochineus, this will come up. So there is, from one article that I've read, and it's the only article that I know of, there is historical use of horse hoof, Fomus fomentarius, for carrying fire, and I think that's the extent of that information. And there was mention of this orange mushroom being used for infants when they have ulcers or mouth problems. They would chew on the mushroom. But I'm pretty sure that's mouth sores and infants, like a chewing toy sort of thing. But to be honest, there's literally none. There's very little. In that same article, I think they mentioned something about a parasol, but I might just be making that up. It'd be worth reading the article. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Next question.
Hey, thanks. When you mentioned using alcohol, is it a particular type? You use isopropyl or some other type of alcohol?
Good question, bro. If I had the equipment to use isopropyl and then to vacuum it out, to purge it out, I'd definitely use isopropyl, because obviously it's always going to penetrate deeper and get more out of whatever it is that you're doing, whatever extraction process. But I tried to source a really good place for bulk ethanol for quite a long time, growing mushrooms and tinkering with things in the lab. Most of my life, ethanol is a really big part of that. So I kind of had to learn how to brew alcohol about 6 months ago, and I've just been making my own, bro. And now I'm just sticking to making organic ethanol so that I can just make sure that I have the best, I believe, the best ethanol that I can use. Yeah. No, all good.
Thank you. Next question.
Hi, I've got mixed thoughts about this. So what they're doing a little bit in Byronshire with the camphor, they're ring barking them and then using inoculated dowels with the edible fungi. And have you seen what they're doing?
I have seen one example of something similar, but I'm not sure what exactly specifically you're talking about. Yeah.
Well, I couldn't tell you which fungi they're using, but I'm thinking probably lion's mane, shiitake, oyster.
Yep.
And then they're drilling the camphors down to the ground, a trap, and inserting the dowels, the inoculated dowels, and it rapidly expedites the death of the camphor without using chemicals. And so that's why I've got mixed feelings. I think it's great because it really is organic and it's very effective. And also I've got concerns about the spread. And as you're talking about the aggression or the dominance of the certain species, so I was just curious your comment on that. Thank you.
No, thanks. Thanks. It's a good question. I think you sort of just summarised what I think about it, because like I'm sort of curious and have the same feelings as you. Like, yeah, that's cool, and then it's like, oh, what mushroom, what effect is that going to have? Like the butterfly effect, you know, we could spend all day trying to do what's right, and like, yeah, I'm sure probably most of us in this room have gone through a version of that. But I'm not sure. You would have to understand the location specifically, what mushrooms being used, and what kind of impact that might have.
And it's obviously been predominantly camphor dominant areas.
Yeah.
Which is already well disturbed.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It'd be really good to... Is this local? Okay. It'd be interesting to watch and see what the effects of that are, and what the future holds for that. I think, yeah. It's a good question. I don't know, so I'm gonna have to. When I'm hitchhiking on the way home, I'll be on my laptop. Hey, yeah. Thank you.
I actually didn't hear what that lady said. Did everyone else hear? Okay, all right. Next question.
I have a baby. I'm new to this. If I get access to mushrooms, how do I powderize it if I just have a normal kitchen with no like equipment?
That's actually a really good question. I've broken a lot of blenders over the last 15 years trying to blend all kinds of stuff. If you have a Thermomix, that's actually incredibly good for powderizing reishi, even reishi. It'll chew through it. Yeah, dry. I beg your pardon?
Sorry, let's just get the mic there so we can...
It will take, for each mushroom, it depends on the density of it.
What did you say, ma'am?
Sorry, I asked how you dry them and for how long.
Yeah. For how long? Because each mushroom is different. It's until it's dry. Like, if you can, just snap it. When I dry like reishi or horsecool fungus, like it's so strong. It's like a real old hardwood tree almost. Some of them. And I just literally dehydrate for like about a week and a half. I just leave my dehydrator on just to make sure, because I am trying to do a particular extraction. I don't want water in there, but it really depends on what your goal is. But yeah, each mushroom's different. Yeah.
There was a question in this area, yes? Yeah, sir?
Thank you, Liam. My question was just about the chihuahua versus wolf. We are making these mushrooms stronger. How strong do they really need to be at the end of the day? Are we just going to walk around and the spores are going to be getting us off? Or... But also, we are changing the profiles of psilocybin, psilocin, biosystem, all the rest. Are we improving on nature? Because I feel like it's sort of got it right the first time. But then again, we are part of nature.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, thanks, bro. Or just in regards to potentiating whatever compounds that you might be selecting for example, psilocybin and psilocybin mushrooms. You're right, man. Just like cannabis, bro, like there's a basket of genetic potential that you could have like X amount of this or X amount of that. So there will be limits that are reached. Just like cannabis, we sort of, to my understanding, know now genetically the potential that could get to full percentages. But then it's like, once again, like you said, bro, what is the right thing to do though? Like, me personally, I'm big on land races. Whether it's any plant, any mushroom, you know, whether it's a San Pedro or anything. And I don't know if what's right or what's wrong, eh, man? And I don't know where we're going, eh, bro? I really don't, eh? But I appreciate your question and share a lot of it, man, eh? Like, just strictly speaking with cubensis, because I think that's what the question was about, typically. Alistair McTaggart and Kane Barlow have done a really, really, really good research article on cubensis mushrooms and their genetic origins, like the phylogeny of cubensis, and comparing them to the Australian cubensis. And what's actually been found is that the genetic difference with the Australian cubensis and the rest of the world is really interesting. So we do have our own little like subspecies. I don't know what you would name that properly. Hope none of my lecturers watch this, but like a little subset of a species essentially, which just by default has its own experience, because much like all our other plant medicines, you know, smoke a different strain of weed, take a different mushroom, it's going to have a different effect, because it's not just psilocybin and psilocin. There's a lot more research going into the other various compounds in there that do have psychoactive effects, and they do have synergistic effects with psilocybin and psilocin as well. So, yeah.
Next question from the audience.
Liam, over here. Thank you for your talk. No, very interesting. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
My question is, given that psychiatrists can now prescribe psilocybin to certain patients that meet certain requirements, and MDMA as well. If that's the way we're going, if in the next 5 or 10 years or so, this may overtake traditional SSRI treatments, or be much more integrated into state-sanctioned psychiatry, mental health, this sort of thing. What do you see the role of people such as yourself? You're clearly an expert. I'm sure you're part of a broader community that has a keen interest in this.
Yeah.
What do you see as, I mean, what's your attitude to, let's say, working with Big Pharma, for example, who might have a more keen interest to sort of come into this area for various motivations, but do you see yourself working with these kinds of organisations? What do you see as your input, the expertise that you can bring into these fields of study? I mean, you've already touched upon before that like there's a lot of areas which require research. There's people like yourself who have that knowledge. I mean, what do you see as your involvement in the next 5, 10 years in this industry?
Oh, that's an awesome question, man. Thank you so much. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for that question, man. That was pretty loaded. I really have to think about that. Like, where I personally see myself, so I've just finished my first year at uni doing biology and chemistry. I've had my own resistance with mainstream all things, like we're in Nimbin, so I used to live up on the hill on Rose Road, so yeah, it's like pretty resistant to corporations. I think I had a toxic view of that to begin with, to be honest. I'm matured now and understood, I think, a little bit better, which is something that's motivated me to go study, to become more professional, to become more knowledgeable and to be able to communicate ideas, even understand what I'm reading, because a lot of science stuff, you read it and I have to Google a lot of words along the way and it's pretty difficult. I think I wouldn't have a problem working with anybody as long as I see that it's true and feel that it's true, or at least have some kind of trust or assurance in whatever's happening. But personally, I'm really about independence and very anarchy inspired. Really, I just want to make medicines for everybody and sell it real fucking cheap and like fuck everyone else, man. But just learning more, bro, I'll be honest, like I just want to personally just keep learning more about mushrooms, learning how to work with them, and yeah, coming up with ideas, because it's such an emerging industry or practice, all of that, that I'm actually just really chuffed to be part of this and be talking about this and be learning this as well, because it is what I love, you know, so, I think you mentioned something about Big Pharma and psychiatrists being able to prescribe. I don't know if there was a question off the back of it, but much like all things when the government comes involved, you know, I see the good and I see the bad in that. And I think it's just one of those things that we're just going to have to wait to play out to understand what that means for everybody. I think it costs like close to $8,000 if you want to do your 10 appointments with a psychiatrist and get prescribed magic mushrooms. So it's pretty expensive. 25,000. Oh man, that's hectic, eh? It's a real good time of the year, so there's lots of mushrooms around everywhere, guys. I know she has a dehydrator, I think. But yeah, actually, I won't suggest anything, but definitely do your own research and do your own discoveries, hey. But thank you very much for your question. I hope I did answer it. Yeah, I did my best, bro. Thank you, man. Yeah. Thanks heaps.
Yeah, thank you so much, Liam. That is so super and very earthy. Earthy like the shrooms. We've got the awesome Dee Driscoll coming up next, and after Dee we'll have a break. You can probably smell amazing food smells wafting in here. There is an absolute incredible feast that's been cooked out there, so I really hope you're considering the Veranda Cafe for your lunch today. So next up we've got Dee. She's come over from the coast, and Dee is a naturopath, a massage therapist, body worker, yoga teacher, and is certified in patient-assisted therapy.